The world we live in is a product of the intricately complex manner through which society has been built upon throughout centuries. Despite whatever economic systems people have built, they are also heavily dependent upon nature as it came long before civilization began, and we hope will remain long after. Since initially writing this paper, the protest against the building of the 30-meter telescope on Mauna Kea is still occurring and has been going on for over 20 days. While the economy may be impacted by the lack of production in response to the protest, it is important to take a deeper look into why people are protesting in the first place. Kenneth Burke's theory of dramatism is based on two interlocking premises. The first, in which Palczewski identifies that language is primarily a species of action, rather than of definition. The second states that the best way to understand human relations and motives is through analysis of symbolic action. In other words, as people are always communicating, people are also always performing. The words they say do not just define what is already known, they also inform the actions that will take place. In order to understand human interaction better, one must look at the actions performed in relationship to the words that are spoken. The dramatistic pentad can be used to analyze rhetoric as it specifically looks at the act, agents, agency, scene, and purpose of the artifact. What must first be addressed is the act of nonviolent protesting against the 30-meter telescope. The agents carrying out the actions are the thousands of people protesting, who derive their agency from the United States Constitution. Physically, this is all occurring on the Mauna Kea access road in Hawaii, as their purpose is to protect the land, as Native Hawaiians consider it to be sacred. But the 5 components of the dramatistic pentad are more than the sum of its individual parts. In the same manner that a puzzle's pieces each hold value but create a much bigger picture once all put together, the pentad is meant to be seen as a whole rather than just small bits of the story. With each part in relationship to one another and in relationship to the bigger picture as a whole, the context provided by the pentad adds to the overall meaning of the rhetorical piece. The relationship shared between the act and agent can be restated as a question of who is doing what. In this scenario, there are thousands of people who are protesting the building of the 30-meter telescope. As Krakow wrote for the Washington Post, the protest grew from between 300 and 500 on Monday to about 1,000 on Wednesday. Some of the protesters chained themselves to metal grates in the road. Consequently, the question of agency in reference to how the agents are capable and able to commit an act must follow. As stated earlier, their agency comes from the First Amendment of the Constitution, which protects the right of the people peaceably to assemble. The Constitution governs and advises the creation and enforcement of the laws within the United States, and thus, the right of the Native Hawaiians to peacefully protest is protected under federal law. The protesters also derive their agency through cultural agency, as they are deeply upset by the continuing desecration of their sacred lands. Despite having already been forced to give up so much, it does not seem to be enough. Oftentimes, the scene will create a sense of exigence. As previously stated, the protests are taking place on the Mauna Kea access road in Hawaii. But this also takes place in a time where the country has a deep division amongst itself. The society in which the protest is immersed has always been driven to learn more and expand their knowledge of all that surrounds us and that which is far away. Take, for instance, the Enlightenment of the 18th century. As a result of this drive, this society is willing to pay thousands and thousands of dollars to look at the stars, but turn a blind eye to the continuing desecration of the Native Hawaiians' land. Which brings us to the relationship between the act and the purpose. The purpose of which is to bring awareness to this subject. The body rhetoric of seeing and beyond that even just hearing that thousands of people are present for the single cause creates a message to those who are capable of changing the situation as it becomes a physical reminder to people of what is happening. The more attention that is drawn to the subject matter, the more the purpose becomes clear that there must be a civil dialogue where these tensions can be discussed and resolved. It is also important to note the diversity in those present at the protest, as it relates to both the agents and their purpose. Natives who call this mountain sacred do not want their land to be desecrated and disrespected. As Walter Wright, one of the activists protesting, stated, this mountain represents more than just their building that they want to build. This mountain represents the last thing they want to take from us that we will not give them. The diversity amongst the crowd shows that this issue impacts more than just a small minority, but as Honolulu City Councilwoman Heidi Tsuneyoshi states, it is a state of humanity. In this situation, it becomes evident that we are all dramatically dependent upon one another and the world that surrounds us. The saying may be that actions speak louder than words, but Burke's theory of dramatism challenges this idea and renegotiates the power to language. By looking at the protests on Mauna Kea, we can use the dramatistic pentad to analyze just how rhetoric is used to strengthen the message of the protesters. Each individual part of the pentad all strengthen each other in their own individual relationships and creates the big picture encompassing a much larger message and providing the audience with context to completely understand the situation. It conveys not only the importance of the issue, but also the importance and urgency of the situation initiating that dialogue.
We are not going anywhere. No. I'm not going anywhere. No.